Good evening, everyone. I'm Ted Simpson, class of 1985, and I have the pleasure of serving as president of the Memphis University School Alumni Executive Board. I'd like to welcome Coach Taylor and his family, our distinguished faculty and faculty emeriti, alumni, and special guests to the unveiling of the 17th portrait in a series of faculty portraits that are on display here in the dining hall. The portrait series was created by the Alumni Executive Board in 2005 to honor MUS faculty members who have dedicated their lives serving our great and beloved school. There have been many changes in the appearance of the campus over the last 2 decades, but these portraits serve as a daily reminder to alumni, students, faculty, and friends that even though the school's physical appearance may change over time, our faculty have been unchanging in their steadfast commitment to provide the highest quality teaching and experience that our students and alumni treasure for a lifetime. Simply put, our faculty are the foundation upon which the excellence of MUS rests. The Alumni Board determined the criteria for selecting each faculty portrait recipient. To qualify, nominees cannot be current members of the faculty, and they must have served MUS for a minimum of 15 years. There's a remarkably high number of faculty who meet that criteria, which to me just shows the high level of dedication and commitment that our faculty have to this school. And having personally been part of many of the nomination meetings, I can say that there's a very impressive list of former faculty that we have to choose from. The discussions when we vote are always engaging and thoughtful, and often the voting goes on for many, many rounds. So what I'm saying is that it is no small feat to end up on these walls. This evening, we're here to honor longtime teacher and coach, Mr. Bill Taylor, whom the Alumni Executive Board selected as this year's subject in the series. Tonight, you'll hear how Coach T profoundly influenced MUS, his students, his fellow faculty members, all while getting milkshakes as a perfunctory bribe. So a little known fact, you can graduate from MUS without taking biology. I was one of the few students who ended my scientific studies at MUS with Phi Chem in 9th grade. So I did not have Bill Taylor as a teacher at MUS, which in retrospect is unfortunate. But I did get to spend a good amount of time with Coach T, mostly as a result of having some buddies and acquaintances on the tennis team. Murray Garrett, Bubba Halliday, Jeff Berry, Scotty Scott, John Morris, just to name a few. I always thought the tennis players were an eccentric group of fellows. Coach T, I'm not drawing any conclusions as to why, just stating the facts. People can draw their own conclusions. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, it really is the faculty that makes this school great. Teachers who spend decades on staff and influence multiple generations of students. Coach Taylor really is the epitome of the long-tenured faculty member at MUS who's put his stamp on the school with his unique style. It is not an exaggeration to say he's an institution at this school, legendary. For my family, Coach Taylor was a positive influence for me, class of '85, for my son Edward, class of 2013, and most recently for my nephew Dave, who will graduate this year. So this summer, I was at our family lake house, and my nephew Dave, out of the blue, said, "You had Coach Taylor, right?" I was like, "Yeah, I did." And he said, he proceeded to do his top 5 Coach T impressions at the dinner table. Dave loved Coach Taylor's class and how he engaged the students. When I talked to my son Edward about Coach Taylor, he said it was remarkable how Coach T used his great sense of humor to connect with his students and get the best out of them. If you gave an incorrect answer in class, he would say, "Sorry, one more time on that? I couldn't hear you over the lights," despite complete silence in the classroom. Or knowing a student who was regularly behind on reading homework, he would ask an obscure question to the class and then say, "I'm going to call on someone at random here all the while staring directly at that student with his signature Coach T smirk. Always trying to get the best out of his students and using his signature brand of humor to connect with them. So Coach Taylor, thank you for all that you've done for MUS over the years, and on a personal note, thanks for the positive example you have set and the positive influence you've had on a couple of generations of Simpsons. Our first speaker this evening is our headmaster, Peter D. Sanders. Pete is now in his 6th year at MUS, where we are benefiting from his nearly 4 decades of experience as an independent school educator and administrator. At his core, Pete is a teacher. In addition to his myriad duties as headmaster, he also teaches a section of U.S. history to freshmen. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our distinguished headmaster, Pete Sanders.
Thank you, Ted, and good evening. We're here today to honor Bill Taylor, his 44 years of service to Memphis University School, and his dedication to the students and athletes over those 4 decades. Bill grew up in Memphis and graduated from Central High School before earning his Bachelor of Science in Biology from Rhodes College, where his father, Dr. Jack Taylor, was a revered physics professor. Legend has it that Bill's interview at MUS included a win on the tennis court with his doubles partner, Colonel Ross Lynn. That win may have been instrumental in his joining the faculty in the fall of 1976 to teach science and coach the tennis team. Over the years, Bill taught biology, advanced placement biology, genetics, and earth science. And from 1999 to 2003, he served as chair of the science department. Because of his dedicated service to MUS, he was awarded the Distinguished Teaching Award in 2002 and was named as a recipient of the Ruth McCaughan Morrison Chair of Science in 2012 and the Lee Murray Spirit Award in 2020. Bill served as varsity tennis coach for his entire career at the school, leading the Owls to 14 state titles and 16 doubles and 10 singles championships. And he coached his teams to 3 consecutive titles between 2013, 2015, and 5 consecutive titles between 1998 and 2002, a run that no other school in the state has accomplished. Outside of the classroom and off the court, Bill always immersed himself in the life of the school. On Friday nights beginning in 1977 in the fall, he served as a spotter for announcer Norman Thompson in the press box during home football games. He continued in that role for over 4 decades. He, along with his colleague, Dr. Reginald Dahl, who is here this evening, rejuvenated the popular MUS in Europe summer program in 1999 and led more than 30 trips abroad, opening young minds to cultures overseas. Thanks to Bill's leadership, more than 500 students were able to participate in the program, and more than 30 faculty members had the opportunity to get involved pursuing their fields of interest while teaching and traveling with students. Bill's legacy at MUS also includes family members and who have walked the halls. His sons, Michael, class of 1998, and Andrew, class of 2002. His stepson, Will Shirey, class of 2002. Nephews, John Taylor, class of 2005, and Ben Taylor, 2013. And the tradition continues with currently enrolled great-nephew Wills Frazier, class of 2025, and Bill's grandson, McCune Taylor, class of 2026. Many of you may be surprised to know that Bill's roots run much deeper at MUS. His grandfather, Harold Adams Spar, graduated from the old MUS in 1912. In the yearbook, which was then known as the Mosquito, M-U-S-K-I-T-O, the mosquito of that year, I had to learn that, they described Spar thusly: gigantic of limb, yet supple as a dish rag, awkward, but agile withal, Spar has stumbled his way to a secure place in the hearts of all. Everybody likes him. His droll antics, his ludicrous actions, and his generous heart. I believe our Coach T, our biology Bill, inherited a great deal from his grandfather. And we're honored that he shared himself with MUS for such a distinguished career as an educator, mentor to many, and coach. Congratulations, Bill, for all you've done to support and encourage your students and your college at Memphis University School. Enjoy this special evening.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Our next speaker is Mr. William Halliday, a member of the class of 1982. Bubba had a storied career on the varsity tennis and basketball teams during his years at MUS. He was also very active off the courts as a member of the Civic Service Club, the Pep Club, Spanish Club, Super Sub Club, Vice President of the Ping Pong Club, and President of the Professional Wrestling Club. I said eccentric earlier. Bubba earned his bachelor's degree at the University of Tennessee and is currently the Chief Operating Officer at Southern Sun Asset Management. He and his wife, Eleanor, are the proud parents of recent MUS graduate William, class of 2022, current sophomore Palmer, and Betsy, a student at Hutchinson. Ladies and gentlemen, Bubba Halliday.
Bill, Nancy, Michael, Andrew, Charlie, Harold, and all extended family and friends, this is a special day and I'm honored to be included. I played tennis for Coach T from 1978 to 1982, barely made it through his biology class my sophomore year, and subsequently have spent time with him off and on these past 40 years since my graduation, playing tennis with him, going on canoe trips, catching up at lunch or on campus. It's been a special relationship for me, and I know for many of you. In addition to my friendship with Bill, our families have known each other in part because my father was fascinated with Bill's dad, Dr. Jack Taylor. They played tennis together at the University Club in the late 70s and early 80s. Of course, Jack destroyed my dad in tennis, but they had fun given that Jack was such an interesting character and shared his knowledge of tennis, physics, string patterns, spin rates, etc. Now, my dad probably had no idea what Jack was saying most of the time, similar to my experience in 10th grade biology. But the experience was so good, so rich, so entertaining that it added to the lifelong friendship we've had with Bill and his family. Coach T's legacy here at the school is well documented, but starting with tennis for now, Bill oversaw, directed, coached, and produced a plethora of accomplishments with his teams over the years, including 16 team state championships. More on that later. Sorry, Pete. Many team second place finishes, several individual singles champions, and even more individual doubles champions. Coach T was also the constant presence and main character for a surplus of stories decade by decade about tennis trips to Jackson, Nashville, Chattanooga, etc., that are legendary in the minds of all the players that traveled with him. Some of those stories were about us and the crazy things that we tried while traveling, and then some of those stories were about Bill and the similar idiosyncrasies that all tennis players seem to exhibit. And some were about the tennis itself. For my crew that I traveled with over those years, Jeff Gray, Bill Lewis, Eddie Murphy, Scotty Scott, John Creamer, Jeff Berry, Murray Garrett, and John Morris, to name a few, the interactions, stories, and fun times are always memorable to recount. And I know Bill has his favorites as well, mostly involving these other characters. I heard one of his first teams discovered a local broadcast of the nightly news going on next to the hotel. And it just so happened that the studio had a barn-type door that was slightly ajar at the bottom. These fine MUS students decided they would shoot some fireworks into the studio while the news was being taped, and they did. Hours later, the message got back to Bill that he should watch the evening news, and so he did. It was quite the show, fireworks sounding off midstream of the broadcast. I guess there was no way to edit those things out 40 years ago. I also think Tiger Buford was on that team, so the punishment was likely not related to tennis. There's also a story in Bill's head about a waitress at Shoney's being coaxed up to one of the players' rooms, but since no pictures are available, please take it with a grain of salt if he tells it so. For Coach T himself, after a rough day of coaching, settling disputes, dealing with Barry, it was the nightly walk across West End Avenue in Nashville to the Quick Sack, where he returned with a brown bag, sipping on what he said was an iced tea. But here's the kicker. All those decades of tennis memories are only part of the story. There were literally hundreds of students who took his classes, traveled with him to Europe, sat in his home room, or visited with him in the halls, in his office, and around the school, all starting in 1976, which happened to be my 7th grade year. Here's a smattering of what I uncovered from some of you and others about Bill's influence on your lives and experience at MUS. Coach Taylor was one of the first mentors to encourage me to consider a career in teaching. He planted that seed long ago, and now I'm a sociology professor at a liberal arts university in Virginia. It's a dream job, and I credit Coach T with giving me a glimpse of what it might look like. Coach T was cool under pressure personified, and my guess is that many of his former players have come to model that same behavior in their homes and workplaces today. We had a very talented squad every year I played for Coach T. While a lot of top players in the area focused mainly on individual practice in the junior circuit, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to complement USTA action with high-level team tennis and build relationships that have lasted at least 2 decades. I credit Coach T. He always had a way of creating camaraderie amongst otherwise very competitive and colorful personalities. As we all know, he kept it light and fostered a relaxed environment, which made it fun and helped to relieve pressure. I'm convinced that this style was perhaps the secret sauce that translated into a winning tradition. I'm grateful for my time playing with Coach T, and I wish him many more milkshakes of perfect viscosity. Coach Taylor doesn't take himself too seriously, but rather he's a delightful, relaxed, charming, and friendly mentor and teacher. Coach T loved talking about life, and his sayings were legendary around the school and always brought a smile to those who heard them. I remember like it was yesterday, Coach saying, "Let's put the quietus on that." Or another classic, "Wrong song." Get Coach T a chocolate milkshake, and you will be pleased with the result. Now back to the question of state championships. Evidently, there was a controversy of sorts for years between Baylor and MUS about the number of state championships each team had won, and the critical year in question was 1985. The TSSAA website indicated that 1985 was a tie between Baylor and MUS, making each of their totals 15.5 team championships. The good news is that through the work of Bill and others at MUS, things were clarified. Maybe they had the Reverend Dr. Garrett testify, since he won the singles and doubles that year, making us the clear champions. Anyway, it's settled now, and MUS stands at 16 and Baylor at 15. And one former student expressed his memories of that rivalry in an email to me and asked that I pass it along to Coach T. With apologies to the RSVP list didn't indicate that people underneath the age of X were going to be here, but this is what the guy said. And McEwen, I don't know where McEwen is, but I know you're friends with Betsy, so don't be talking to her about this stuff. So yes, Bill was an engaging teacher, coach, confidant, and friend, and he cared deeply about the boys and young men he taught. In part, because Bill was a kid at heart himself, he engaged us as peers as we got to know him. His own family, namely his brothers Charlie and Harold, commented that Bill's love for teaching, for being a kid at heart, was very similar to their dad. The two of them were constantly messing with other people, sneaking up on them, surprising others with their presence. Bill also loved the outdoors growing up, and his fascination with nature, science, and our physical world was nurtured in his home growing up, and grew into a lifetime of teaching, being curious, and engaging others in life's deeper meanings. Bill also loved what he taught. After all, his dad was a physics professor, his brother an orthopedic surgeon, another brother an inventor, so the scientific gene was present and accounted for. Yet Bill wanted us, his students, to expand our minds and engage the world beyond his classroom, beyond our athletic abilities. And he thrived as a mentor and a guide for the MUS in Europe experience for many years. Here are a few comments from colleagues about Bill's influence on the MUS in Europe experience. While staying at the Dahl family home in the Loire Valley in France, Bill and Reginald dreamed of a program that would expose Memphis boys to another culture. They also thought there should be a significant academic preparation for the experience, which would become a semester's course before travel. Their vision to this day, unique among high schools, became a reality in 1999 when the first two groups of MUS boys went to France and England. MUS students have traveled to Europe every year except during COVID since then, meaning that 34 separate groups, which is approximately 800 boys, have studied and traveled, and 20 faculty members have taught semester-long courses at the school, and then on the road on subjects they are passionate about, and with boys ready to make the connections between what they've learned in the classroom and what they can experience on the road. And from another colleague, for years, Bill sponsored the MUS in Europe program, a fixture at Dr. Dahl's lovely home in the Loire Valley. Students would overwhelmingly respond that were Bill not there, the trip would not have been nearly as memorable. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So Coach T, for all his shenanigans and fun-loving ways, wanted us to know what drove us, what affections were primary. And he questioned us and challenged us as students to know what we believed about the world we inhabited and why. My 80s crew, and I'm sure others, talked about life and death, our own brokenness, guilt, and who created this world we are in. My takeaway was that Bill wanted us to think deeply about our faith, whether in God or in man or in something else. And he challenged us to understand our faith's connection to reality and its impact on our daily lives. For that and so much more, Coach T is a special person to not only those of us here today, but the collective MUS community, the students of his 42 years, his colleagues, friends, and certainly his family. Thanks to all of you gathered for listening, for bearing with me, and once again, congrats Bill on this special honor.
Thank you, Bubba. Thanks for the remarks and that unusual sign. If you could please report to Coach Ray on Saturday morning for Saturday school. I think everything will be fine. We're honored next to have with us this evening Headmaster Emeritus Ellis Haguewood. Mr. Haguewood joined the MUS faculty in the fall of 1969 to teach English and Bible. During his tenure, he served in many capacities, possibly most noteworthy as advisor to the yearbook, and was recognized by students and colleagues with the 1990 John M. Nail Outstanding Teaching Award and the 1992 Distinguished Teaching Award. Then, in 1995, the Board of Trustees named Mr. Haguewood as headmaster, where he served with distinction for the next 22 years. Please welcome to the podium Ellis Haguewood.
Well, Bill, you may be tempted to say, as the author of Ecclesiastes said, the end of the matter, all has been said. Not so fast, my friend. I'm happy to be able to speak tonight because to me, Bill Taylor has always epitomized the ideal teacher in an independent school for boys. He's a superb biology teacher whose students always scored extremely well on the advanced placement examinations in biology. He's obviously a tennis coach whose record is unparalleled in the state of Tennessee. And he is the architect and guiding force of our unique MUS initiative, one of the most innovative programs in the history of the school, MUS in Europe. In all his roles, teacher, coach, guide, he was transformational in the lives of boys, now men, who remember him, revere him, love him for his excellence, his integrity, his wisdom, and especially, perhaps, for his wit. And I commend the Alumni Executive Board for committing their energy and resources to this faculty portrait series, the idea for which we can thank our inimitable Director of Advancement, Perry DeMint, who proposed it over a decade and a half ago. These paintings remind us each day of distinguished teachers who added their impressive talents to make MUS a great school. Teachers who have a cherished place in the hearts of our alumni. These portraits every day connect current students and new faculty to the tradition of excellence in teaching and the idiosyncratic qualities that mark the illustrious history of our faculty through the decades. And these portraits to me suggest, as the writer of Genesis said, there were giants in those days here at MUS. Bill joined the faculty in 1976 wearing his trademark khaki pants, his well-cut beige corduroy jacket or his traditional blazer, his button-down tattersall or pale blue shirt, and his wallabies, or later hush puppies. And he brought with him his own collection of memorable argot. Almost anything ironic or outstanding could be classic. Old knee injury, shrapnel, or just Ho Chi Minh Trail. On a good day, everything was copacetic. Ask about something he didn't know anything about or had no opinion about, it was, but have you tried Colt 45? Always a good question when the occasion arose, which way to the beach? I love that one. Tennis balls were spheroids. If you were thirsty, you drank dihydrogen oxide, H2O. If Coach T had a question, his approach was usually a smooth, hey, what's the deal? Great shot, he might say, holy moly, or good golly, Miss Molly. A long drawn-out rally point that was lost or won was the rope-a-dope. And if he were thoroughly upset, he might express himself with Judas Priest. When not interested in the conversation, he might excuse himself with, got to see a man about a dog. Or anytime he was angry at students, it was, whoa, 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 or hey, 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 wrong song, muchacho. And as his players were ready to make their way out to the court, the new can of balls they got might come with a last bit of coaching wisdom, just win the last point. His classroom expertise, his quick wit, his easy rapport made him a favorite among colleagues and students of every persuasion. Bill's name is always one of the first names that come up when alumni ask about the school. Alan Graber put it this way, Coach Taylor was never overly preachy. Instead, he had an innate ability to quietly influence students and players to do their best. The lessons he taught are still important to me today. Show up, play fair, do your best, be responsible to yourself and others, persevere, and endure like Darwin. I love that one. He taught me that the only musicians I need to listen to are Sam Cooke and Jerry the Iceman Butler. Trace Suddarth sent this brief encomium. Bill Taylor is from the old school. His is the way teaching, coaching, mentoring should be. He was a role model for students as a scholar, athlete, and gentleman. Bill could mix it up with any scholar of biology or evolution. He was a fierce competitor on the tennis court as a player and as a coach, and no boy could hope for a better role model of a Renaissance man with strong moral character. Andrew Hoosers and many others told me that back around the turn of the century, Coach Taylor allowed one of his students to talk him into housing a python in the biology lab. The student named it Bill, after his favorite biology teacher, and Coach T later would remark, Houdini would have probably been a more appropriate name. This student entrepreneur charged his peers $1 each Friday during organizational period to watch Python Bill catch and swallow a live mouse. Well, Fridays came and went, and one day the snake disappeared. Months later, a janitor found it under a bucket, and the snake went back to its home in the lab. However, toward the end of the year, the python disappeared again. This time, it was never found. Rumor has it that for weeks, our maintenance men refused to work in the science building, and that even today, many believe it resides in the deepest layers of the science basement, perhaps lying in wait for a small seventh grader. Trace Suddarth covered a class for him years ago, and Bill left a video for his freshman class to watch. The video featured a female marine biologist who leads the autopsy of a beached sperm whale. Toward the movie's end, she discovers that the whale is a male. And as the cameras deliver a close-up view of the animal's organ, she gives the students a rather graphic description. And when Bill returned to school, Trey asked him, "How in the world did you expect me to control a group of 14-year-old boys during that video?" Bill smiled and simply said, "Old Indian trick." And of course, there was the annual viewing of the Swedish classic Ingrid and Eric for many years. A lot of you alumni remember that one. An educational film that features the birth of a baby, and was highly touted as must-see TV by previous students. Bill is, of course, very famous for his ability to supply quick answers to questions from students. Louis Smith asked him in class once, "Coach, should we be taking notes during this lesson?" Coach Taylor replied, "I would imagine some of the better students will." Or the time one of his students asked, "How long do you think this test will take?" Bill said, "About this long." Students in his biology classes learned that milkshakes seem to hold, as Norman Thompson elegantly put it, seem to hold it, quote, "some alchemical property of enhancing leaden grades," end quote. Very clever. You know, some say that the quest for the Holy Grail, that is, the perfect milkshake, was a get-out-of-jail card for Saturday school punishments. When pressed for comment by reporters, Coach T clarified that, in all seriousness, the guys were just being nice to me. These milkshake stories have taken on a life of their own. The historic Coach T milkshake, ritually prepared, combines 3 ingredients that he called the Holy Trinity: vanilla ice cream, chocolate syrup, and whole milk. And they were mixed in such a way that a quintessential but ineffable viscosity resulted. The object of veneration and myth, the Coach T milkshake, was a big seller for a time at Cold Stone Creamery across the street, next to Amerigo's, celebrated with its own plaque containing instructions for preparation. Like offerings made to placate a god, Coach T milkshakes appeared often at the door of his office. Coach T, outstanding biology teacher, obviously, and also an extraordinary tennis coach, but in an article by John Varlas in the Daily Memphian celebrating Bill's years as tennis coach, Varlas noted, Coach Taylor's career at MUS began with a handshake and it ended with dozens of state titles, hundreds of players' lives impacted for the better, and thousands of miles put on the odometer in building the state's top high school tennis program. Bill told Varlas, I figured out one day that I had circumnavigated the globe twice in a 15-man van, usually a Ford Econoline, filled with testosterone-laden guys. As a tennis coach, he was part teacher, part strategist, part disciplinarian, and part psychotherapist. In other words, a complete coach. Zach Daly pointed out that an underrated characteristic of a high-performing team is outstanding team chemistry, which of course begins with the team leader. I'll always remember his fierce competitiveness under the surface. Of all the competitive situations I've experienced, I've rarely seen someone with emotions so balanced in tense moments. Greg Sossaman called him master of the mental game. Mason Cousins mentioned that he gave his players the freedom to play their own games and often simply stood under a tree silently watching the matches. But if he recognized a player getting frustrated or having a tough go of it, he provided words of encouragement or cracked a joke to help the player calm down and refocus. Murray Garrett remembers Bill as a teacher coach who understood the simple priorities of life. It was the spring of my senior year, 1985, said Murray. 2 significant events in May were scheduled for the same week, my biology final and the state championship in Nashville. So I asked Coach Taylor, what were we going to do about finding an alternate day for me to take the test, since we were heading to Nashville a day or two before the scheduled examination? He said, Murray, your biology exam is very important, and winning another state championship is also very important. Let's do this. Let's figure out the plan for you to take this biology exam after we see your results in the state championships, if you know what I mean. Mason Cousins and his brother Benji played together on the varsity one year, and after a match in Nashville, Bill called their father back in Memphis. I have some good news and some bad news. The bad news is that the whole team, except for Benji, have food poisoning. The good news is that Benji will be driving us home. Side note, Benji was barely 16 at the time. Well, superb biology teacher, excellent tennis coach, and the guiding force behind MUS in Europe. One of the most innovative, creative, and successful programs in the history of this school. Each year from 1999 until he retired, he promoted, recruited, planned, organized, and shepherded the summer trips with Reginald Dahl, sometimes 2 trips in one summer. And during the 2 decades of his leadership, He would guide hundreds of students and scores of faculty members, all with his usual calm and dry wit. Barbara Crippen observed, "Traveling with Bill and Reginald in the lead meant sharing genuine scholarship and daily adventures, exhilarating and unforgettable for students and adults alike. Bill's reserved demeanor combined with his vast knowledge and unique sense of humor made him a person around whom myths easily accumulated." His wife, Nancy, offered this classic anecdote. She said, on an MUS trip highlighting World War I, while in Cambridge on the university's graduation day, university students were celebrating along the Cam River. As our boys punted downstream, a totally nude female graduate walked across a bridge and then stood at the edge of the river. Immediately, our boys went remarkably silent. Tension hung heavy in the air. And as the young lady entered the water, Bill slowly turned to me, raised his right eyebrow, and said, "Holy smoly, great posture." Elizabeth Crosby captured, I think, what we all love about the man with this tribute. Bill's a Renaissance man. He reads, he sketches, he designs pétanque courts and restores canoes. He composts, he travels, he plants elaborate gardens and tends them. He founds life-changing program for boys. He mentors them in museums, on tennis courts, and in biology labs. He appreciates 50s rock and roll, What's New Pussycat, Bridge Over the River Kwai, and ice-cold French rosé. He guides expeditions on foot or by canoe to the best spots down the street, up the river, or across the ocean. He makes Nancy, his wife, as well as his many friends and large family laugh and enjoy what life offers because of the spin he puts on it. You know, one of Bill's lessons in life, look good, feel good, seems especially appropriate tonight. And Bill, you do look good. And you should feel good as well, knowing that you have blessed and influenced and shaped and sharpened the lives of each of us in this room, along with scores of colleagues and thousands of boys who are not present this evening. Now, your portrait will join those of other iconic figures in the history of Memphis University School. This pantheon of teachers whose memory we and succeeding generations will never willingly let die. And so today, with deepest gratitude, we salute you and your legendary contributions as teacher, coach, guide, mentor, and friend. Congratulations, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Haguewood. Apparently Murray did win that state tennis championship because remarkably he graduated from MUS. Our portrait of Coach Taylor is by award-winning artist Dawn Whitelaw. Ms. Whitelaw is a graduate of David Lipscomb University, where she was subsequently an adjunct art teacher for 30 years. In 2016, the American Impressionist Society elected her to master status, and in 2017, she received the Master's Award of Excellence at the AIS National Exhibition. Ms. Whitelaw's art is included in numerous private and corporate collections, now including Memphis University School. Unfortunately, Ms. Whitelaw could not be with us this evening. She is represented locally by Mrs. Elizabeth Francis, a broker for Portraits, Inc. Thank you, Elizabeth. Now, I would like to ask Coach Taylor and his wife Nancy to join Mr. Sanders and me as we unveil the portrait. So the dining hall houses the portraits of revered faculty members like Coach Taylor, who have played important and influential roles in the lives of generations of students. In this room, we are constantly reminded of the primary reason we continue to appreciate and support Memphis University School. Coach T devoted his life to the students and to the school. His influence will continue to impact so many of us for years to come. On behalf of the Memphis University School Alumni Executive Board, it is my pleasure to present to the school this portrait of Mr. William S. Taylor.
Thank you very much. I too would like to welcome the alumni, faculty, friends, family, students here this evening. I appreciate all of your support and encouragement. Thanks to MUS for organizing the event, and to Headmaster Pete Sanders and Ellis Haguewood for their very kind remarks. I'm grateful to Ted Simpson and the entire MUS Alumni Association for including me in the Faculty Portrait Series. This is a great honor. After retiring, I volunteered in the archives here at school to move boxes around. One day I came across a 1955 letter addressed to Dr. Harold Adam Spar, my grandfather. And the letter was inviting him to the groundbreaking ceremonies here at the new MUS at 6191 Park Avenue for the sole reason, not for the sole reason, but the main reason was that he was the president of the then MUS Alumni Association. Interestingly, the school had stopped in 1936, and yet they still had an alumni association in 1955. So he felt it was important enough to support the Alumni Association with his time and money. I'm glad that he is part of the history of the Alumni Association here at the school. Bubba Halliday and I did arrive here at MUS in the same year, 1976. He was a seventh grader. I was a first-year teacher. As a ninth grader, Bubba stopped me in the hall, introduces himself, and in so many words tells me that he's going to play tennis for me and that I can relax. He has my back. Bubba's always had a gift for taking care of business. He gave me a gift certificate for 44 milkshakes when I retired. Money. It's interesting how the milkshake evolved at MUS from being just a liquid asset into being a type of cryptocurrency. I will always be indebted to MUS for its opportunities that it's given me. My sons and grandsons and nephews and grandnephews are here. I had the opportunity to work with the tennis team and the MUS in Europe program. All those things were great. Even a Friday 7th period biology class could be invigorating. Not everything was great here at school, but those things certainly were. One thing that was not great in my mind was the boys' basketball homecoming dance. And for me, it was a real challenge. The boys loved it though. But I would look forward to the dance and hear a real band like Tommy Burke and the Counts singing Stormy Weather. But instead, you'd walk in and be faced with a DJ, a smoke machine, and some flashing lights, while sitting on a folding metal chair at the end of a long, well-lit hallway in front of the bathrooms, riding herd on things. 40 minutes into the dance, you realize time has stopped. You're drowning in existential distress and facing a challenge on a biblical scale involving the number 40. Noah's 40 days and nights of rain, Moses' 40 days in the desert, Jesus' 40 days of fasting and temptation. If I were to multiply the dance by 44 years and compare it to the fate of Sisyphus pushing a big rock up a hill and repeating this for eternity, Sisyphus' fate would pale by comparison. After the dance, there was always the need to simplify life, to return to basics. A tonic was needed. The writer, Lawrence Durrell, suggested that a taste older than meat, older than wine, is just a cup of cold water, a tonic every generation of mankind has known. I opted for a room temperature Coke 45 malt liquor tall boy from the 7-Eleven store, just to reestablish homeostasis. Thank you very much. It's just an incredible evening. Drive safely. And thank you.
Thank you. The members of the Alumni Executive Board join me in thanking all of you for being here tonight. We invite you to stay and visit, and please come up and congratulate Coach Taylor before you head home. Safe travels to all. Good night.